welcome. My name is Angela. I work at Onkaparinga Libraries for anyone that doesn't know. I've got with me today also Jacinta, who is co-hosting. Hi, Jacinta.
Hello.
And of course, I've got Bren MacDibble, our guest of honour today.
Thank you.
Really excited to be talking to you today. But before we get started, I wanted to just say that all of Bren's books, which are here, are all available to put on hold at your library. So you can do that on the phone. You can be coming in person or online. So you can put all the books on hold. Also, I won't forget to mention that Dimmicks at Glenelg also stock Bren's books, and Dimmicks have been fantastic working with them to make sure all our authors are well stocked with them. So you can pop over to see them if you want to own your very own copy of Bren's books. And I think that's all. There's no exits I need to mention or toilets or anything like that because you're all at home. So I wanted to start by saying I first read Bren's book How to Be in 2018. It won Book Week honours. It won that year, didn't it, Bren?
Yeah, it won the CBCA Book Week Book of the Year for junior readers.
Yes, and in that same year, this book was on the honours list, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's also me, but that's more for children over 12 because it deals with war, and as you may have guessed if you've read How to Be, I'm a bit of a raw and ready writer, so when I depict a war scene, it does get a bit gory and nasty. So if you're delicate of stomach, possibly put that one off until you're older.
I just thought it was amazing that you wrote two books that got in honours and won in the same year.
And those are my first two novels.
Yeah, so I think that was pretty impressive. But can you tell us why you chose to do this book under the Callie Black name?
Just because I didn't want readers under 12 approaching it. Because it is quite violent. So instead of having readers reading up, as they sometimes do, I just wanted them to wait till they were in high school before they found that one. Yeah, and also it won. This was technically my first novel, and it won the Ampersand Prize for a first novel with Hardy Grant Egmont. But at the same time, How to Be was sitting at Allen and Unwin, and they decided that they would publish it too. So I had two publishers. So you know how when you're a writer, you just send lots of work everywhere. So that all came back and surprised me by Hardy Grant going, oh, we're going to give this a first novel prize. And then Allen and Unwin saying, and we're going to publish this. And I'm like, oh, two publishers, two books. One for children, one for YA, and it's all happening at once. But I will say I did spend about 18 years learning to write and submitting novels before that happened. So it wasn't just one day I sat down and wrote novels and they were good. It took me 18 years to get good, and I am a bit of a slow learner. But I think I got there.
I noticed that you have wrote some other books. More educational books.
Yeah. There's a lot of books with Blake Education who do the graded reading that you see in schools. So I have about 12 books with them, and they have the Gigglers, which are funny little books, and they have reds, blues and greens for the readers reading with the vocabulary getting harder and harder. So a lot of children will have already read some of my work, but it'll be, sort of light and funny and highly illustrated. They're really good series. I really love them. And Blake was the only company who just let me write whatever I want and then go, oh yes, well now that's a green one or that's a blue one. And so they were really, really good.
Was there much difference in writing, like your writing style did you have to adapt it much to write the novel opposed to writing the educational books?
Yeah, the educational books, they're for people learning to read. Whereas these, they're quite stylistic. So you wouldn't be learning to read and then pick up something with Peony's voice, because she uses a lot of slang, and she chops her sentences up, and she speaks however she wants. But she's never been to school, of course, so she wouldn't speak correctly. But when you're learning to read, you of course, you need the decent sentence structure to follow along. So they're written more simply, but also a lot of comedy in them, because and pictures, of course. So they're more like short stories that have been sort of stretched into a mini chapter book format quite often, and highly illustrated. But you feel like you're reading a chapter book, and it's sort of before you get to novel stage with your reading. Yeah, but How to Be is much more complex in storyline and also in language. It's quite complex language.
In How to Be and in Dark Spaces, there seemed to be that theme of bees, even though it was different, because How to Be, obviously the bees are all extinct, and in Dark Places it's science fiction based, but the civilization sort of live a bit like bees.
Yeah.
So what's your interest or fascination with bees?
I love bees. I love that it's mostly girls. It's all girls. It's got a queen and all the workers are girls, and there's just a few boys roaming around and they don't do very much. The girls do everything. And they all like live communally, and they look after each other, and they all, tend to look after the hive. And when they're born, they each have a job. Like the moment they're born, they set about cleaning up cells and stuff. And they don't go off and fly and look for flowers till later, after they've graduated. So they start off as cleaners, and then they move into being feeders of other pupae, and then they can finally get to fly. And that's sort of the last stage. They fly and look for pollen to bring back and fill up the cells. So, and then they keep all the babies in the bottom of the hive, and they keep all the honey in the top, the storage area. So yeah, when I made the alien race in the Dark Spaces, there's an alien race, and they live in a hive, and they're all female as well. So, and they kind of all work to look after the hive. So that was kind of that thing of like, maybe the bees are smarter than the humans. They've got a better society going than we have.
That is very true. I know in that year, 2018, when both of them books were in the book week scenario, we at Woodcroft Libraries specifically were quite obsessed by doing all our activities around bees, because your books inspired us. So what we did with a couple of class groups is we actually bought lots of different honey and got kids to taste it and tell us which ones they liked the best.
Yeah.
And what I always thought was really funny about that is a lot of the kids had never tasted honey.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I thought that's probably a bit of a shocking statement for you that loves bees and honey.
Yeah, I grew up on honey. I think for about 3 years straight, I would only eat on my sandwiches was butter and honey. And my mother was just like, eat something else. I'm like, no, I want butter and honey. Yeah, no, I love it. And the neighbour across the road here, he's got hives, and we had a swarm in our trees the other day, and he came over and got them, and he gave me a big pot of honey, and I'm like, oh, it's not going to last very long.
With all of your books, they're all very futuristic in the sense that something happens. So like obviously How to Be, the bees die. In Dog Runner, the grass dies. Across the risen sea, the sea is rising.
Yeah.
And so do you have a theory on our future, and if any of which would be our future, like what would you think we are going to be, what's going to be our problem in the future?
Well, the seas are rising. They've already started moving Jakarta up to a hilltop. So the whole city of Jakarta is gradually going up the hill, and people are building seawalls. Bangkok needs a seawall. Yeah, the seas will rise. They won't rise as much as in Across the Risen Sea. I did take it to the extreme in that book because it's fiction. Yeah, but there's a whole lot of things, as we've seen, when we start encroaching into forest, we get new diseases like the novel coronavirus from bats and things like that. So what we need to do is actually, and David Attenborough at the moment has got this big call to pull back out of the forests, return it to forest, use less land for farming. So I think unless we do that heavily industrialized farming that we're starting to see happen in places like Holland and Finland, and places where they're growing everything in big glass houses and layering everything up, and using aquaponics and all sorts of other things. Unless we move to doing that and a largely plant-based diet, then we're going to continue to see diseases and things like that happen. I think there's some really good stuff coming. I think we're going to get rid of diesel, and we're going to get rid of petrol, and that's going to help clean up our atmosphere. As we've seen, all being in lockdown, how much better the air suddenly got. So that's going to help. But yeah, seas will rise. We will have to pull back from the coast a bit, or build seawalls. Weather patterns are all going to be different and more violent, because we've changed the weather, and we've got all these polar vortexes happening where the weather gets blown down from the poles and then pulled up into the poles, and so there's going more extremes of hot and cold. So I think we've got crazy weather, rising seas, but I think the air is going to get better when we embrace the electrical age. And I think we're going to learn how to farm more sustainably, especially if we all listen to good, smart people like David Attenborough, and start pulling back and giving the natural world itself back, getting those trees growing that absorb the water into the soil and prevent runoff, which is polluting our seas as well as ruining our land and things like that. So I think we're smart enough to turn the future around, but yeah, some things are going to change. And
all of your books have a focus on the environment and food security, and there's lots of issues in your books. Do you have to do a lot of research for all of the topics that you cover in your books?
Yeah, I wrote How to Be without doing a lot of research initially, and then I went back and researched it, and I was surprised how much I had to learn about bees in order to write a book where there are no bees. I thought that was a bit strange. And then I got a grant to go and write The Dog Runner. So it was a travel grant, so I had to travel around and interview people and find out stuff. So I went to see the dogs run up in Queensland, which was really amazing. They run at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. because dogs in Queensland can't run when it's hot. So they run them sort of sunrise and sunset. I went to a tunnel where they grew mushrooms. I went and walked a lot of railway trails through Bendigo, where they've shut down the railways, and now they're all trails that you can walk. Because the kids leave the city via railway trails. And I went to interview a man about grass in Steeper, which is a grassland regeneration place down in the Wimmera. And learning all about how to regenerate grassland. And he's very into native grasses as well. And then I read Dark Emu, of course. So learning more about the native grasses and their role in history and how they were cultivated in order to attract the kangaroo or in order to grow for grain, and then ground and how in Australia people were baking bread 600 years before the Egyptians. So there was a lot of cultivation going on, and those seeds are still out there. And the guy who regenerates the grasslands, he never plants grass. He just, like in the Wimmera and places like that, those are some of the great grasslands of the world, the Wimmera and the Mallee. If you leave the land alone and just look after the soil, the grass will outcompete all the weeds, because that's where grass lives. It's the Mallee, and the Wimmera, so that's where grass lives. So he just runs this process where he runs cattle over the land to keep the weeds down, and he doesn't drench his cattle. So I've got these amazing pictures of dung full of dung beetles, and the dung returns to the land. That helps the fungus in the soil. It feeds the fungus in the soil. The fungus in the soil attaches itself to the roots of the grass and helps the grass extract nutrients. So there's this whole fungus thing in the soil, and if you get that right, grass will grow, and it will keep growing. And the native grasses, they die back and they leave a root which will grow again, unlike the English grasses that just die and they have to wait till their seeds regrow. So it was just absolutely fascinating, just learning about all the old knowledge that we don't seem to know when we put fertilizer on the land and we kill off the soil. Like Aboriginal people have always known, you take care of the soil, you take care of the fungus in the soil, and everything works out. So, yeah,
that's really interesting. I think it's such a small world that you're talking about the grasses and dark emu. When we've just had Bruce Pascoe do a talk for Onkaparinga Libraries about his book, and we've got a whole series of events called Southern Deadly Yarns, where we get Aboriginal authors to talk about their experiences and their books. But if anyone is interested in hearing more about that, we've got some webinars on our website, and there's some Apple podcasts that you can watch too. So they've all been transferred into podcasts for people out there. But you can check out our Facebook page and website for all that information. But it's certainly a big area that Australia doesn't seem to know a lot about when you start delving into it.
All modern farming, England as well, and even New Zealand, which you think is clean and green, but nobody is taking care of the soil and, you know, the way they should, because, you know, they're all going for the fast profit of spread the fertilizer, but it actually degrades the soil over time. It runs off into the sea, creates, you know, weed issues and all sorts of chemical imbalances, and into the waterways. And you're thinking, oh no, if people would just not demand so much from the land, just let the land recover, let the soil recover, it could feed us all. So
yes, a good lesson that we're not learning at the moment. Maybe we will with COVID, and we're all a bit more at home and not traveling so far.
I just see that Andrew said we should have done an acknowledgement to country. So I would like to acknowledge the elders of where I am in WA, which are the Nunda people. So I just pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and their future leaders.
Yes, that is very true. On a different note, my last question, and if anyone in the audience has any questions, don't forget to put it in the Q&A. But my last question is, all of your main characters, they're not heroes, but they're all very brave. So we've got Peony, obviously, in How to Be, and Ella and Neoma. Was that intentional to make that sort of strong character?
I felt like Peony's whole world was the orchard. She'd never left. She'd never been exposed to media about the world outside, and she was an orchard expert. So she had that sort of confidence, like, I know my whole world. I know every inch of land. I know how the orchard runs. I know everything. So she was like this person who just was super, super confident in her world. And then she got taken to the city, which she didn't know anything about, but she just kept applying her same principles like, why should I clean up after you, Esmeralda? That kind of thing. So that was funny. Ella this is Dog Runner. Ella was more in our time frame moving forward, so it was closer to now. And she knew about the world, and she was much less confident about leaving home and setting out into the world. She knew the dangers. So she was someone who didn't start off brave. She started off very timid, but everybody came to rely on her. So she had to find that strength and step up. And I think in my new book, Across the Risen Sea, Neoma is, again, really confident about fishing and boating and everything she needs to know to survive in this world that she lives in, with the seas that have risen. So when she encounters the shark and the crocodile and the pirate hag, she just kind of goes, okay, take them on. She takes it all in her stride. She's careful, but she's not that intimidated, because she's someone who's grown up knowing how to survive and look after herself, and she's got a lot of independence.
She certainly did have. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Jacinta now, because we do have a few questions that came in previously that Jacinta's going to ask of Bren.
All right, Bren, first question. We're wanting to know, what are you working on next? What have you got coming up soon?
Do you know Zana Freylon? She's written a whole pile of books like Wisp, and a whole pile of human rights type books using children. They're quite ethereal, and you never quite know where they're set, but they're dealing with stolen children and children in difficult circumstances, shall we say. So we've been writing a story together. We started last year, and the main issue it's about the world after a pandemic, and that was before we knew we were going to have a pandemic. So we've just finished that, and her character is in the past and my character is in the future, but my character in the future lives on a self-reliant township that they're not allowed to leave, and everybody lives in little townships dotted around the country, and they're very self-sufficient, and they never go into the natural world. They're letting the natural world recover. And then this child from the past who has this disease, he's been frozen, and there's a derelict city next door, and she finds him in there, and they wake him up, and so it's kind of like her character from the past is just slightly in the future, and my character's far in the future, and trying to bring this boy back to life who's been cryogenically frozen. So
oh wow, so got the big one coming up there by the sounds of it.
It's a funny one. And then I've just started writing another novel for children set in the desert here, and all the babies there've been no babies for years, so this girl hasn't had a sibling for ages, and then the babies start being born, but they're all born with sort of lizard skin, so they're perfectly attuned to the desert life. But so she's got a little brother that she really, really likes, but he's got lizard skin, and people are poking and prodding him, and she's trying to look after him.
Oh wow, where have your ideas and inspiration come from? Not only those books, but some of your books that you've written previously, The Dog Runner, How to Be, any of them?
I don't know, just playing around, I think. I just wanted to write about changed futures, because I think kids see a lot of stuff happening, and they can't imagine how they would survive something like that. So when I write about children surviving, I'm trying to say to the readers, life goes on, things change, but life goes on, and this is maybe how you would cope with this, or maybe how you would cope with that, because I think there is a lot of anxiety about climate change among readers, And I'm hoping that, I don't know, I think there's readers who want to read books that are light and funny and escape reality. And then there's readers who are so worried about reality that they want to explore what might happen. So I'm sort of writing for the kids who want to explore what might happen and how you might survive. So it's the survivalist kids that I'm kind of targeting with my books, I think, because I was one of those. I was always like, but if the nuclear bomb lands on the top of the world, what happens down here? And because it was all about nuclear bombs when I was a kid, and we were always, and you could never find anything. You could never find anything that was targeted towards kids to read what might happen and what the future might look like if that happened. So,
oh, that's fantastic. Reading what you would have liked to have read as a child.
Writing for kids like me.
Now, question here: have you always wanted to be an author?
I don't know. I used to do a lot of writing in high school. And I don't know whether I ever imagined I could be a writer then. I think that was pretty far out there. I did a lot of writing mainly just to read what I'd written and entertain myself. And I kind of write like that now. And then about 20 years ago now, I started writing for children and doing a few classes and stuff. And, you know, I kind of thought, I have a kind of funny way of writing and people seem to like it. And that just kept sort of growing and changing and evolving. And then, finally I came up with sort of a way to write that readers really responded to. Yeah, but it took me 18 years to figure that one out.
Bit of a journey there. So what do you think helped you to get your books published?
I did a lot of classes, but when you do classes, they only teach you so much. And then you just find you're going to classes and they're teaching the same thing again and again and again. So you get to basic writing, being able to write a basic book, you get there fairly quickly, but then you get stuck. And then there was nothing, things would say they were master classes, all this and that, and they weren't helping me. They weren't giving me new information or telling me where my writing was going wrong or anything. So then I started reading everything I loved and really dissecting it. How has that author made me feel this? And why has that author used this language? So I picked all the things that I love because, of course, I want to write like people that I love to read. So I picked everything that I liked reading, and then I kind of started dissecting how did that author do that? You know, why do I feel that? And what is this pacing and stuff like that? And then I sort of came up with a plan for my own writing and started playing. And In the Dark Spaces was this massive play novel that I just wrote to play. And I thought, I'm going to write anything I want. I'm going to write the things that I love to read. And I know it's not marketable. No one's going to want to read it. And I just started throwing everything in there. And I could have written 5 novels for the amount of words I've used on this. So I've started it again about 4 times. I've in the editing process with Hardy Grant Egmont, we threw out about as many words as we included. So it's only about 64,000 words. I think there's about 160,000 words in the bin. But I just went for it, and it was my play novel where I learned about voice and using all sorts of different things, and writing scenes where you go into the scene strong and you tackle something, and then you come out with something else starting or some way where the reader goes, oh my goodness, I didn't see that end coming when I started over here. What happens next? And just sort of, and TV programs use that a lot too, like series that you really, really love. They will often, you get to the end of the first, what do they call it?
A season? Yeah.
Each program, you get to the end of the first one. I can't even think of the word. You get to the end of the first program in the series and you're like, oh, I've got to watch the next one. And that's why you binge watch them when you can download them, because it's
like episodes ending on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, episodes. Yeah. So I was trying to do that as well in the dark spaces. So there was a lot of playing and back and forth and everything. And then I got to the end of it and I was like, oh, I really love this. I should show it to someone. And so I did. And that was my first novel.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a journey with that one.
I know.
Goodness. It must hurt though, having to get rid of all of those words. But have you got any sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to say I'd written about 6 novels for young adults prior to that. So I'd had a lot of practice as well.
Have you got any tips for some of the children in the audience who might enjoy writing who might want to be an author? Any tips?
I think keep practicing and keep entertaining yourself, and write till the end. So you because quite often, if you're like me, you write 1,000 openings and you never complete them. But you need to learn how to do middles and endings as well. So complete the novel, but write to entertain yourself and think about what can happen next. And your first idea may not be your best idea. So if you're thinking about what happens next, write down 3 ideas and make them as crazy as you want. And you might find that your first idea is not your best idea, but your second or third idea might be useful, or they might be too crazy. But you wouldn't have had those ideas if you didn't go, well, I'm going to think of 3 ideas instead of I'm just going to think of 1 idea.
Oh, that's great advice. Now, I've been asked here, who are your favourite authors? You've mentioned some of your books and some of the books you've read. So who would you say are some of your favourite authors or favourite books?
Oh, goodness me. I like Vicky Wakefield. Her novel that's just won a CBCA award for young adults. That is so good. I read that and you can just feel the hurt and the trap of poverty oozing out of it. I love Vicky's books. I like Zana Frelon's books, of course. Margaret Mahy in New Zealand. There's so many I like. Margot Lanigan, her style when she writes, so good. There's so many books I love.
Oh, that's great. Yes, there's so many, and you just keep reading, and there's just still so many out there, aren't there? So I was just going to ask too, what is your it may vary a bit between books, but what's your process in writing a book from beginning to end? Do you have the same process, or does it vary?
Pretty much the same process. As I think of an opening, a scenario, something that's changed, and then I just start writing to entertain myself. When I make a plan to write, I get bored because I already know what's going to happen. And it's a bad way of writing, because you will write more words, because you will start off going, but you'll be wrong. And you'll have to come back and go in a different direction, or you'll get to the end and you'll go, okay, so that was fun, but that bit there couldn't have happened. So now I'll have to go back and rewrite it, and then it will need a new end or something like that. So it's a very labor-intensive way of writing, but it's very entertaining. And when you're having fun and entertaining yourself, it all comes out in the prose and the things that happen. And it feels more fun than if you sat down and made a plan and then just filled in the boxes. Mm-hmm. You're not allowing for, sudden whims of fancy or sudden ideas that are going to make things better. But I think that's also because we can do that if we've consumed a lot of media, if we know in our heads the basic story. We can trust our heads to tell a story using a story arc. So we kind of understand what a story is. So if you're going to wing it, then you will have had to have consumed a lot of books or a lot of and a lot of TV programs. You can't write books unless you read books. But you kind of know story arcs, and you know how a book works, and you know, yeah. So that kind of stuff you have to trust is in your head if you're going to just wing it by the seat of your pants and have a lot of fun. Yeah.
Oh, very true. And do you have a favourite part of writing a book?
I love sitting down and writing the opening of a new book, and like anything's possible and this is going to be the best. And it's not till you get halfway through you go, oh, maybe it's not going to be the best. Maybe I'm just a bit off with this one. And then rewriting. Sometimes it's enjoyable if you know what's not functioning and you can fix it, and it gets exciting. Writing with Zana was really fun because she's a really good team member. And yeah, I would send her what I'd done, and then she would go, oh, tweak that. And then she would send something back, and she would be like really helpful. And I'm like, oh, this is like instant feedback, and it's really good. I like writing with Zana.
Had you collaborated with another author before that, or was that your first?
No, that was my first. She was on Twitter asking for ideas on a novel, and I gave her an idea, and she goes, no, that's not going to work, but I really want to write that book with you. And I'm like, what? I thought I was helping you. So we ended up just having a go at it. And it was really good because, I mean, the whole Zana's in Melbourne and the whole lockdown and everything, it's kind of like, it's easier to focus on little bits. Especially for her with all the stress of lockdown and stuff, and the kids being home and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's been a sort of a wild trip. When we started off separate stories, and then they come together, and then we went 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 like that. So yeah, it was a lot easier to write that way.
Oh, fantastic. Now I've got a question here about the dog runner. So where did your idea for the fungus come from?
Oh, actually, there is a fungus. Now the wheat that we eat today is much, much different to the wheat that humans used to eat. And it may be the reason why there's a lot of sort of problems with gluten and bread and stuff these days. We kind of switched to a whole meal diet, which includes eating the husk of the wheat about the same time as we started fiddling with the husk of the wheat to keep fungus out. So there is actually a really terrible fungus. Is it Nigeria? I'm trying to think of where it is. Back in 1999, this terrible fungus broke out, and its name relates to where it broke out, but it was in the top of the African continent. And it quickly spread across the world and hit England as well. And it's called a red rust fungus, and it took out all the wheat crops of this entire country, and then it spread elsewhere, and they basically had to burn the wheat crops. And they do eat a lot of wheat in Africa. They have enzima and mealie meal and stuff, which is the bulk of their diet. So it was really devastating, and that spread into England. And ever since then, people have been trying to keep this fungus out. It's a fungus that occurs naturally, quite safely, but then it leaps in evolution every 10 years, and no one knows when that evolutionary leap is going to occur, a bit like a novel coronavirus. Just leaps and suddenly it's super, super dangerous. So, so it's actually a real thing for wheat. I don't think it would take on every single grain. So I've gone a bit crazy with the dog runner in the fact that I took out all grasses. So as you know, grass includes sugarcane and corn and rice and oats and rye and stuff, as well as wheat. So, and grass that animals eat. So I've taken out all the grasses, but I think a fungus would mostly stick to one family of grasses and wouldn't attack everything. So I've made it a much worse catastrophe, then it possibly would happen. But it's interesting to me, when I wrote this, I was trying to give up all grass-based products for a while to see if it would improve my health. And all of a sudden I was like, but this is grass and this is grass and this is grass. It's not just wheat. There's so much more that we eat. And I think I managed to reflect that with Ella talking about Anzac Bickies and all sorts of things that are largely comprised of grass, and even our eggs and our meat and our dairy all comes from grass. So it was really interesting researching that. I'm trying to think of the virus. Uganda. It's called UG99 from Uganda. So if you wanted to look up UG99 from Uganda and read all about their grass fungus crisis, you can do that.
Oh wow, lots of research went into it, but this is a very big process. But it was interesting too then, as I was reading it, and you think, yeah, it might have been slightly more worst case scenario, but it's certainly interesting to think of what that could be, what that could look like too, as Ella and Emery did. So yeah, it's certainly interesting to see it from that perspective. Now, speaking of Ella and Emery, their bond and their connection in the book as brother and sister was incredibly important and incredibly strong as well. So do you have a brother yourself? Or?
I have 3 brothers, and I think I maybe wrote Emery sort of because he was such a good big brother. My big brother's not so good. He would never have looked after me the way Emery tries to look after Ella.
Hopefully he's not listening.
He won't be listening. No, but yeah, he was a bit mean to me when I was little, but yeah, no, he's I suppose if we were in a crisis, he would look after me, but generally he didn't see himself as his job to look after me. He's only just slightly older. He's not very much older.
Okay. Yeah.
I was a bit more competitive.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Bren. We really appreciated you answering all our questions and helping us get in your head for some of your different books. And it was very interesting hearing about all your research that's gone into the different books. So thank you very much for joining us today.
No problem.
Now, I'll just also say to everyone who's listening, please follow Onkaparinga Libraries on Facebook to find out about more upcoming author talks. You can also find them on Eventbrite. And also we have the Southern Deadly Yarn series, which was discussed earlier, on our website, on YouTube, and it can also be found as a podcast as well to listen to. Now, we've got another Book Week author talk tomorrow, and that's with Helena Fox, who'll be joining us at 12 noon. So
how it feels to float.
Yes, how it feels to float, correct. Yes, so she'll be telling us all about that one too in our Book Week special. So we'll also be sending out a survey questionnaire to all the participants. So please let us know what you thought of it, what you liked, and any feedback that you do have. So thank you to everyone who did join us today, and a special thank you to you, Bren. Loved listening to you speak today.
Thank you
for having me.
And thank you, Angela, for hosting as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Take care.
Thanks.
Until next
Bye-bye.
time. Bye.